Hello out there, and thank you for joining me for this dose of virtual vitamin Z. My name is Akilah, educator with the Detroit Zoological Society. And as you can tell, I'm kind of stuck in the grass today, so it means we're going to be outside, not quite outside, but we're going to be doing some activities outside in the garden. Have you ever wondered to yourself, all of the beautiful gardens that are around the zoo, who takes care of those? And why and how do they look so nice? We're going to explore what that looks like today. We're going to explore maybe how you yourself can also maybe plant a native garden in your own backyard or in your own space, creating your own green space, or you can plant some things that you can harvest and actually eat. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so this is one of the gardens that is at the front of the zoo. Nope, not at the front of the zoo. I always say the front, but it's near the middle of the zoo, going back towards the archaic ring of life. So you see the carousel that's in the background, and this is one of the adopted gardens that is managed by one of our some of our amazing volunteers. So most of the gardens that are in the space that are not managed by our landscape crew. Shout out to them for always making it nice and beautiful around here. If they're not managed by our landscape team, they're managed by our volunteer gardeners who do an amazing job and a lot of research to make sure that they're caring for these gardens, not just in the summertime when things start to look really nice, or not just in the spring when they start to bloom, but all year round. So these guys come in on a very frequent basis to make sure that these gardens are going to be upkept along with our landscape crew. So like I said, this is one of the gardens. I do believe it has some native plants in this space, and it has some annuals and some perennials. So annuals are going to be plants that, that will sprout at a certain point of time of the year, and the perennials will come back ever so often. All right. This right here is going to be a vegetable garden, and specifically this is a green vegetable garden. So you see it looks a little different from the other photo that we just showed. I'm going to go back to it quickly. There was a lot of symmetry in that in the garden that is here at the zoo. So you see what's on the left side is going to be on the right side. They have bushes that are going to be nice and angled, but at the same time, these are plants that can be planted together all in one space where they're not going to be trying to fight for nutrients and fight for the sunlight that they need to grow. All right, and so this right here is going to be your vegetable garden. And like I said before, specifically, this is a green vegetable garden. In some vegetable gardens, you can plant greens, and sometimes you can throw in some peppers, or you can throw in some fruits ever so often as well. Just kind of depends on what you want your garden to look like and if it's going to be viable in that space. And sometimes people plant tomatoes in their garden, but this looks a little bit different. See, things are going to be in rows or columns that you have right here. You can see up ahead, it looks like they may have some good cabbage going. I think I might spot some spinach and some kale. All right, so let's go over the skills and concepts for the day. So today we're going to be talking about using fine motor skills, graphing, identifying the X and Y axis, identifying coordinates, and we're also going to be using our observation skills with the activity that we're going to be doing today. Excuse me, so sorry. Had my breakfast this early. All right, the vocabulary we're going to introduce or reintroduce is going to be successive harvest. So just remember that you're going to keep that vocabulary word in mind, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more as we go. So this right here is a garden that is right before Buddy's. If you know where Buddy's Pizza is on ground, and it's a really nice garden. They just put up a nice bridge and some nice logs and a really nice pathway. And this is a garden that just got started this year. And this is what it looks like when you get ready to start your garden off. So you see some things are starting to sprout, but it looks like our landscape crew and the team that worked on this was very meticulous at how they were planting things. You see, we have rows and columns here again. So we're also going to keep that in mind, rows and columns, when we start talking about the X and Y axis and then talking about coordinates when we're planting. All right, right here is near our park safety area. If you're familiar where that space is a little bit past that new garden that just got started this year. And I'm not sure if you can see in this photo right here, it looks like some pine trees that are growing, but there's a nice enough amount of space in between. So these plants aren't So these trees aren't growing on top of one another, and they're not fighting for the nutrients of the soil, and they're not fighting for the nutrients of the sun that they need to get. And then right here is some other bushes that are planted. These are usually here year round as well. These are nice spaced out in between. It may not be as much space as it is in between the large trees, but bushes, they still need space too. And I want to show you this. This is going down one of the main roads at the Detroit Zoo. If you know where the Rackham Fountain is, this is a row that has a lot of these, I'll call them spider plants, and I'm pretty sure that is not the correct term for it, but it kind of looks like a spider to me because it's all spiky. But these plants are planted nicely together, but still at the very roots, they have enough space for them to grow where they're not fighting for nutrients, all right? And so that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to plant your garden and plant things that you either want to harvest, or you're planting things that are native because you want some native species or some native animals to join your space and to visit your space. So items that you're going to need for the activity. You're going to need an outside garden space or outdoor garden space, or a 5 by 5 foot area indoors just to do just this activity. You'll need some paper, tape, masking tape preferably, pencil, yarn or string, something that you can see that's not going to contrast with the green grass. You'll want to have a marker for your labeling, popsicle sticks to use as stakes, and you'll want to have measuring tape, so either a yard stick, a meter stick, but something to measure some things out. You're also going to want to have some small tokens to do this activity. So whether you have pebbles, dry beans, buttons, or some loose change that you can put in the 5 by 5 foot space, where you can see the materials that are going to be placed on the ground and that you and your young one can see. All right, so first we're going to create our X and Y axis, all right? So the X and Y axis, so a couple of ways that we can describe the X axis. Let's go with that first. So let's think about X axis. We know that it runs across, right? So going across means it can go left to right. Sorry, go left to right, or right to left, or it can go what we consider horizontally. That's another way you can describe the x-axis. Or if you're thinking about directions, it can go from east to west. So there are a couple of different ways that you can describe the x-axis when you're talking through this activity with your young one. All right, now the y-axis. Thinking about the y-axis, we know that it goes up and down, right? Or another way we can explain that it runs vertically, or thinking about directions, it runs north and south, or south and north. All right, and if you can see, I created my coordinates here. I used some red ribbon that I had, and I wanted to measure out 5 by 5 foot. And so you'll see the X coordinate there, and the Y coordinate there, the Y axis here, and the X axis here going across. And what I used some masking tape to label everything, and I used my measuring tape to do 1 foot spacing in between, because I wanted to make sure that it had a nice enough amount of space in between when I'm going to be doing the activity. And whether that's I'm doing the activity with one of my colleagues, or I'm doing it with another little person. And the same thing with the y-axis. You want to make sure that there's enough space. And so I wanted to make sure that it was going to be equivalent to what I did on the X. So what I did on the X, I did the same for the Y. And that was 1 foot spacing in between. And I put a marker for each one, label it 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No. Okay, there we go. All right, so you see I outlined this to show where it was on the photo. And it does look like it is at a bit of an angle, and it's just because of the way that I took the photo, but I guarantee you it is at a 90-degree angle. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you have a 90-degree angle, because that's when you're learning about coordinates and you're learning about the X and Y axis, you want to make sure that you have a 90-degree angle. But in this picture, it doesn't appear to be a 90-degree angle just because of the angle that I took the photo. All right, so I wanted to make sure that I placed my materials in the garden. So I showed, okay, so I showed on this photo that I wanted to mark and label the coordinates 0, 0. So 0, 0 is going to be at the very corner of the coordinate plane. And you can see that I just kind of boldened the 1 through 5 so you can see it. And I wanted to place my materials in my garden. So I chose the x-axis first and then the y, and I placed all my materials there. So I'm not sure if you can spot the 5 items that I put in the garden, that I put in my garden, but I'm going to see if you can find them first. And I'll give you a second. All right. So there's one item there, and it looks like my green apple. There's another item there, that's my piece of corn. My third item right here was a green pepper. The fourth one was a tomato. And if you can spot that fifth one in the corner, you have some really great observation skills doing this activity. So now I want to figure out exactly where did I place these. All right, so now we're going to be talking about identifying the coordinates. Now remember, you want to identify the X first and then the Y. So when you're doing this activity and when you're talking to young people about how to identify the X and Y axis, you always want to make sure that X is identified first and the Y second. Because if you interchange the numbers, that means that it's going to change where all these items can get placed in your garden or in your space. All right, so just making sure that you remember where all these items were. And we're going to go with the x-axis first for everything. So let's look at the apple. So we notice, looking at the x-axis here, running from left to right, east to west, the the apple, the green apple was on the number 2. So I have the number 2 in the box. So going to the corn, which is the second piece, it is on the 0 coordinate. Kind of looks like it's a little to the side, but it's on the 0 coordinate. The next one was the green pepper. The x-axis coordinate was 4. The tomato was at 3 going across. The pear was at 5. So counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So looking at all the numbers on the x-axis here. Now we're going to go. Nope. Oh no, there we go. All right, now we're going to identify our y-axis. All right, so just make sure that we know where all the items are. And remember, this time we're looking at the numbers that are running up and down, vertically, or north and south. So these are the y-axis. So looking at the apple was at 0, so it's here. Looking at the corn, that number was at 2. Looking at the pepper, what do you see? It should be at 1. Looking at the tomato, it was at the number 3. And then looking at the pear, it was at the number 5. That's the y-axis. So looking at the numbers that are running up and down vertically. Now this is what it looks like together. So the apple was at 2, 0. The corn was at 0, 2. And you notice that you can see the difference. You can see the difference in the placement this time, where you're looking at the x-axis and y-axis, where the apple's at 2, 0 and the corn is at 0, 2. So we have that here and here. It looks completely different. So you definitely want to make sure that you're reinforcing that when you're doing this activity with your young ones. All right, the pepper was at 4, 1, which was there. The tomato at 3, 3. And the pear was at 5, 5. All right, so why should we plant this way? So different plants and different seeds, they need enough space to grow the way they need to. So this is what it looked like altogether if we just did a really quick photo and wanted to see what it looked like when we mapped everything out. So different plants, like I said, different plants and seeds need a different amount of space to grow when we're harvesting these plants. And when we're harvesting even native plants, that something that we're not eating. And coming back to that vocabulary word, successive harvest. So successive harvest is when you're planting one thing at one time, and then maybe you're going back to plant the same thing to make sure that you have enough of the harvest for the entire time that you want it. So say for instance, for this week, you're planting corn, and you want to make sure that you have corn a month from now. So you're going to maybe start planting another batch of corn the following week. Or maybe you decide that, oh, I want tomatoes added eventually. So you start adding tomatoes to the plan. And you don't want to plant everything all at once. You want to make sure that you are doing some research and you're looking at how long it's going to take to harvest these things. So it's almost kind of like cooking. There's a method to the madness, as they say. All right. And usually on the back of a lot of labels, when you have seeds, they give you a suggested amount of plant care, harvest, and the health benefit for things that you're actually consuming. They talk about the spacing, the depth, and the days it takes to sprout something and the days that it takes to harvest. So make sure that you're looking at the backs of those packages. It's not there for decoration. It's going to be there to kind of help you engage how exactly you want to plant for yourself and plant things for your family. All right, so what's next? I would definitely urge you to do some research and exploring of some native plants. So I know we talked about fruits and vegetables today when we're planting, but think about how we're planting things here for the animals at the zoo. So not always thinking about the animals that already live here in our care, but think about some of the pollinators that come through. Think about the bees that come, or the monarchs, the butterflies, and the other insects that love the space. You want to check your soil or the things that you're planting. You want to make a plan for the things that you like to see sprout. So like I said before, whether it is something that you want to harvest to eat, or whether that's something that you want to just plant and have other native wildlife explore, so it looks nice in your yard and you can have those friends visit you. So I would like to say thank you again for joining me for this dose of virtual vitamin Z. Again, some skills and concepts that we covered today were those fine motor skills, where you're trying to figure out the stakes and wrap those materials around and doing some labeling. You need to use a lot of fine motor skills for that. We talked about graphing and what that looks like, identifying the X and Y axis. We talked about identifying coordinates and the importance of that. And we also use our observation skills with that activity. So there are a couple of different ways you can do that activity. You can do the activity where you you're allowing your young person to identify the coordinates, or you can identify the coordinates for them and they can place the materials out the way they need to. And you don't have to always do it with seeds. You can just have a really quick, fun activity that you're trying indoors or outdoors. So thanks again for joining me for this dose of virtual vitamin Z. Again, my name is Akilah. Stay well, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon.